to and okay. I'll start over. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting have been posted. Okay. Let me run down the membership that I have that's here. I don't have Brian Mason at this point, is that correct? I don't have Rob Neal yet or LJ Lopez.
LJ is here.
Yeah, Dick, sorry, I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. LJ, you're here? Good.
Yes.
Rob Neal, or Brian Mason? Okay. Welcome to our May meeting. It looks like we have an excellent presentation tonight. I've had a chance to review the email that came out today with all the visuals that you sent out, Cameron. Really, it's a very extensive and very easy to follow set of views and overviews and dome pictures and drone pictures and everything else. So should be a good discussion. Moving to adopting the minutes of our last meeting with 2 corrections. B should be listed as a member, and Ida Lee did attend. Is that correct?
That's right.
I have one more. As one more correction under just 2 lines above number 4. Just it looks like there's a spelling error. I didn't look at it carefully, but I just noticed that one. Expand instead of expand. So the T becomes the D.
Okay, did you get that, LJ?
Yeah. So review it one more time for me. We're changing.
On number 4, so 2 lines above number 4, where number 4 is second. Yeah, 2 lines above it. So under number 3.
Yep.
Any other corrections or additions?
Dick,
Okay, can I have a motion
Dick,
to accept them as amended?
did you mention,
I'm sorry, what, Cal?
so moved? No, did you have B down as a member or as liaison?
Don't know.
I believe she said she was listed as a member and
Yeah.
she is not, she
She's
is
a liaison.
liaison.
Right.
Correct.
I got that. Do I have a motion to approve the corrected minutes?
Yep.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, that was Ida Lee.
Second.
The motion was by, I didn't pick up who made the motion or approved the motion. Okay, let's go. This time we're going to take on the very excellent Rivanna River Corridor Plan presentation. I think I'll turn that over to Cameron for a brief introduction. If that's appropriate, Cameron.
Thanks, Dick. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. I'm excited to say that tonight we're going to have a pretty excellent presentation on the Rivanna River Corridor Plan. In attendance tonight, we have Sandy Shackelford from the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. We also have Tim Padalino, who is our Chief of Parks Planning, and then one of my colleagues in Community Development, Dan Butch. He's a transportation planner. All 3 of them are going to be talking at certain points, and We're going to do a presentation first, and afterward, if anyone has any questions, we'll be able to do a question and answer period. So Sandy, if you would like to share your screen, I know you have a PowerPoint ready, but I think we can begin.
Sure. Thank you all for having me tonight. As Cameron said, I am the Director of Planning and Transportation for the TJPDC, and we've been working on this plan. I think you all are familiar with it. It's a joint planning effort between Albemarle and Charlottesville. We've been working on it for about probably 2 years, going on 2 years now for this phase. So we're excited to give you an update tonight on what we're looking at. For those of you that maybe just need a really quick refresher, this is looking at the section of the urban corridor starting at Penn Park at the northernmost boundary and then going south to I-64. So that's the part that we're going to be planning. What I was instructed to do tonight was to give you all some updates, knowing that you all have received the plan and that you've been engaged in this process. So I'm just going to jump in kind of to what we've been doing since the steering committee met previously in September and talk to you about the initiatives that we've been undertaking to get this plan basically to a form where we have a draft that we're working from. The biggest thing that we had to really tackle was public engagement. I'm sure you all are aware that COVID obviously led us to a point where we had to re-strategize what we probably would have normally done to conduct public engagement through the plan. So coming into the steering committee meeting in September, we had developed some draft vision statements and guiding principles and had started looking at what recommendations might look like. But we really wanted to do some really robust vetting of those high-level goals and priorities with the public. And since we couldn't actually be in public on the river or go to neighborhood meetings or things like that due to COVID, we had to re-strategize what that public engagement would look like. So we did a couple of different things to adapt to the landscape that we were dealing with. The first thing is that we made sure that our website was updated, that the project website was updated with you know, good information about the project, with the maps, with all the draft materials that we had. And what happened during the pandemic is that we started hearing from the local county staffs that there was just a ton of visitors to the river corridor, and it really highlighted how important this river corridor was as an outlet to people during the pandemic. There were not a lot of places that you could go to, you know, visit with friends or family. There weren't a lot of things you could do to really sort of de-stress from, you know, what was happening on a global basis. And so the river became really important. And we ended up utilizing that to spread the word that there was a planning process that was happening for this river by putting up signs along the river corridor. I'm sure some of you probably already saw some of those when you were out there, if that's a place that you visit. And that just helped direct people to the website so they could go to the website, get them to the website as quickly as possible. And then we could ask them questions and give them a chance to provide comments. We also held 2 public webinars. So again, adapting to the times, we moved to this virtual format that we're all very familiar with, and held 2 public webinars, again, just so the public could attend those in October. And to make sure that we were also reaching out to people, not just that came to the river corridor to use it for recreational purposes, but also people who had vested interest in it. We also worked with the local counties to create a mailing list so that anybody who owned a business or property along the river received the mailing. And that was just to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to know about the process and to be able to weigh in if it was something that was important to them. And we also identified several stakeholder groups that we sent email notifications to, places like the Chamber of Commerce or nonprofit organizations that worked in the area. Dan will talk about this a little bit more later, but this public webinar on the Ravenna River Bridge and pedestrian crossing was not actually part of this corridor plan specifically, but it did have a lot of nexus. And so we also used the opportunity while we were doing all of this outreach on the Ravenna corridor plan to also coordinate getting notification out about the Ravenna River Bridge and pedestrian crossing feasibility study that we were doing as well. So I wanted to go ahead and mention it here. And then this last thing that we did was we had these stakeholder group meetings with people who had more subject matter expertise in several of the recommendations areas. And these were smaller groups of either county or city staff, but it also included just people who had technical expertise on things like historic preservation or cultural assets in the area, public safety personnel, those kinds of things, just to really make sure that we were thinking about all the implications of recommendations as cohesively as possible. So as you can see, we had about 70 unique website comments that we received, and the majority of people were concerned about the environment or about recreational amenities. And then you can see we had a pretty good handful that had comments that related to bicycle and pedestrian crossing and public health and safety. These comments were really beyond what we were asking for specific survey questions on. And these were just people who, they took the surveys and they had additional things that they wanted to make sure that we were considering. And so they expressed that to us through the website. These are just a couple of examples. One of the really early themes that we saw was that there was a lot of concern about invasive species throughout the area. So that definitely made us want to make sure that we address that in the recommendations. But like we talked about, the recreational amenities related to the trails was really important to a lot of people. So we had a lot of suggestions about things that we could do to enhance the trail system. And then we had a good handful of people who had specific interest in the history or culture in the area. And so we got quite a few responses that wanted us to make sure that we were considering certain cultural or historic aspects of the corridor. In total, for the 2 webinars that we held, we had 44 people attend. And one of the things that we did was we did polling on the version of the vision statement and the guiding principles that we had put into place. And so that was really interesting to get some feedback on whether or not we were on the right track and what tweaks we needed to make to revise it. So overall, we generally felt that we were getting good supportive responses. We had 88% of attendees agree with the initial draft vision statement that we had put out. And we got this feedback that we needed to communicate more about that people in the area had needed to take a more active stewardship role in protecting the natural environment. And that we needed to figure out better wordings to make sure that some of the principles that were in that vision statement didn't conflict with each other, specifically relating to whether or not we could improve recreational activity in the river corridor, and at the same time also enhance and create opportunities for quiet and serene solitude along the river. And the feedback was that those might not be possible to do both of those at the same time. And then we also asked the same question about the guiding principles, just saying, hey, are we on the right track here? And as you'll see, the ones that had the highest levels of disagreement, so this is percent agreement, so a high number is good, and the lower the number, the more disagreement there was. So none of them were really too far off, but there was concern about this new development and redevelopment. And mostly that was because people felt so strongly about wanting to preserve the environment that they were really concerned that we did not necessarily recommend so much development that there would be negative environmental impacts. And it was really the same thing for the recreational activities as well. There was concern about us recommending strategies that would over-recreate the area to the detriment of the environment. And then, like I said, we also have these smaller stakeholder discussions with subject matter experts and members of the technical committees to better strategize what these recommendations should be. And so for each of these guiding principle topic areas, we basically had a separate meeting and just had a really focused discussion, and that ended up being really helpful. I also want to mention that in addition to the public engagement, while we were doing all of that, we also were reviewing other localities' corridor plans and really determining what were some of the main themes or other recommendations that showed up that we wanted to pull out I'm not going to spend a lot of time covering this, but I think it did feed into our discussion about, you know, what kind of strategies are places like Richmond or Greenville, which are kind of considered the gold standard for corridors, what did they include in their plans that we want to make sure we discuss as opportunities for us as well. So we did all this public engagement, we did all this visioning or benchmarking, and then we come back and we refined the vision statement that we started with. So this is the final version of the vision statement that we're working with right now. And that's not to say that it still can't change, but we think this is pretty close at this point. The Ravenna River flowing through Charlottesville and Albemarle County is one of the community's greatest assets. The urban Ravenna River corridor is and will be a dynamic place where people can experience a natural environment, healthy outdoor activities and venues, peaceful and serene opportunities, and important and historic cultural points of interest. And then we went back and we refined the guiding principles. So one of the things that we started with that made this river planning process unique compared to some of the other river corridor plans that we looked at as part of the benchmarking is that we started this process and there was a really strong guidance from the technical committee made up of city and county staff, basically saying our goal is not to create a corridor plan for one particular purpose. You know, other places might have an economic development plan for their river corridor or a flood mitigation plan or a recreation plan. Really, we want to do all of these things in the right balance along the river corridor. And so that's what we started with, was we had this circle with 6 or 7 equal wedges saying all of these interests are equal. The feedback we heard when we took this to the steering committee and then was reinforced when we also took it to the public is that this is true, except for when it comes to environmental protection. So if we are going to really make environmental protection one of our guiding principles, in order to make sure we do it well, it has to be the most important guiding principle. And only once we consider the environmental protection and stewardship aspects of the river, that needs to set the context for how to find the right balance among all of these other priorities. So what we ended up doing was really reinforcing the need that environmental protection needed to be the first and highest priority as far as the guiding principles were concerned. So we did that by putting this band of environmental protection around the graphic. And then once environmental protection is ensured, we can go back and we can say, and then among these other guiding principles, all of these are equal and not one of them has a greater priority than the other one. So we ensure that the riparian system is protected. We ensure that we're not going to cause degradation. And from there, we want to find the right balance of, now that we've ensured that, what is the right amount of recreational activities to have? What is the right amount of new development? What is the right amount of access to the trails and to historic and cultural features? So that was where we ended up with the guiding principles to really establish the priorities for the corridor. All right, and from there we started developing recommendations. So I'm going to go through these first 3 sets of recommendations, and then Tim's going to cover the rest. You'll notice that we said environmental protection was the most important one. We're not starting with that one because it's so important that I'm going to let Tim cover it. And he just has better awareness of what's already been being done by Albemarle specifically. So he'll be able to touch on that a little bit more. So these slides, just a brief note before we start, there's a lot more detail in the plan itself as far as the recommendations that were developed. Several of these points will also have sub-points with more specific recommendations. If you look at the bottom of your screen right here where it says page 41 to 42, that is the page in the draft plan that this refers to if you want to follow along to see any more of the details that are there for these development sections. So the first recommendations related to development and redevelopment. Basically, the concern that we got from the public was really that we want to be careful that we're not promoting development in environmentally sensitive areas. What we really want to make sure that we emphasize as part of this plan is that this plan is based on existing land use patterns where appropriate development opportunities and redevelopment opportunities have already been identified. So we really tried to make that much clearer in the plan to reduce some of that concern that we heard expressed about promoting additional development in the area. Cameron or Tim or the other Albemarle County folks would probably do a better job of communicating this, but what we heard from the Albemarle County staff is basically there are so many limitations and restrictions based on the geographical and natural features and steep slope regulations and things like that in this area, that opportunities for new development to come into that area are already very limited. So the most important thing is that we're not promoting any additional development that hasn't already been identified as an opportunity in the plan. And then from there, what we were really trying to accomplish with the recommendations was to promote opportunities to tie development and redevelopment into the existing landscape of the river corridor, so that businesses are seeing, having a connection to the river corridor, everything's kind of working together to reinforce the experience of being in the river. So restaurants have decks that face the river and that patrons can look out over the river while they enjoy their meal or their beverages, things like that. So to have, just to better integrate it as one, to reinforce the experience of being on the river with the businesses that are sited there. And also to work with businesses to enhance the experience of people who might be traveling through, so that when somebody is floating on the river or walking on the trail or something like that, the businesses have the opportunity to partner with the localities to make that experience of passing by that property interesting and part of the, feel cohesive as part of the overall corridor. So those were the main goals of the development and redevelopment recommendations. Moving into historic places and cultural features, really a lot of this came down to taking an inventory of existing assets throughout the corridor, making sure that we are protecting resources that are sensitive in nature, and also promoting resources that are appropriate, that might not be as well known by the public, and that aren't sensitive to the point where we have to worry about them maybe being degraded if there's more public interest in them, but really trying to promote awareness of what the resources are within the corridor that people should be aware of, and we would like to continue to educate people on. So a lot of this is really related to partnering with other organizations to increase awareness and to conduct programming to improve that awareness. We identified several partners. A really big priority in the last steering committee that we held was finding opportunities to partner with the Monacan tribe. One, to make sure that they've had an opportunity to review and provide feedback to this plan, but also to continue to enhance relationships that have already been established with the Monacan community, and to continue to grow those relationships and raise additional awareness that the tribe is still a thriving part of this community, and provide more opportunities for that awareness and that partnership. So that's really, we also wanted to really emphasize that there's a really broad range of history that, that has made its mark on this river corridor, and to make sure that we were thinking about it in a broad, robust sense to communicate the full range of people groups and histories and experiences that have passed through the urban corridor. And then the last set of recommendations I'm going to talk about before I turn it over to Tim is related to public safety, health, and welfare. When we started talking about this section, it initially was related more to the perception of safety. So things like improving lighting on the trail and making people feel like they were safe on the trail. And what happened when we met with the stakeholder group with the expertise of people like the chief of police and emergency service personnel, that kind of thing, is they really emphasize that we don't want to make people feel like there's a safety concern if there isn't a safety concern. What we really want to do is we want to empower people to feel like they know where to get information and how to handle it if there are different safety concerns that might arise. So we went more of the direction from let's find a different place for unsheltered persons to, be able to camp out because we don't want them near the river, more to a place where let's help the public understand when it's appropriate to try to find assistance, when somebody needs help and who to call if they think somebody needs help, more of that kind of thing, to empower people who are at the river with the information they need to help make the decisions to keep themselves and others safe. So a lot of this was really just about information sharing. Let's put phone numbers out there. Let's make sure people are able to communicate where they are if they do have an emergency. Let's make sure people know what the dangers are if the water quality is bad or something like that. Really more focused around information sharing versus trying to make people feel that they're safe when there's not already necessarily a safety concern. It's a perception and not really a actual safety issue at the river. So really, it's really just a mindset shift that we wanted to make sure we weren't reinforcing some maybe potentially negative assumptions going into this. So that's it for the first three. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tim now. And Tim, if you just want to tell me when you're ready for me to advance through the slides, I'll be happy to do that.
Sure, will do, Sandy. Thanks. And great job summarizing a huge amount of information and like a very lengthy, detailed process to date. It's really good intro so far. And yeah, like Sandy said and Cameron mentioned, my name's Tim Padalino. I'm the Chief of Parks Planning in the county's Parks and Recreation Department. I see some familiar faces and some folks I've worked with in the past, but a lot of new names and faces to me. So if you see me out in Dardentow or on the Old Mills Trail, feel free to flag me down, say hi, introduce yourself, ask questions, whatever. And another point of information before I share these recommendations is I've been involved in the technical team representing the county staff side of this city-county PDC planning process. But the project manager for this is actually David Benish, the Chief of Planning. So you're kind of getting a backup chief tonight, but I'll do my best to convey environmental protection and recreational activities and trail and bridge recommendations. So with that intro, I'll just start to run through these environmental protection recommendations with the reminder that this is kind of the baseline set of recommendations, and provided that environmental protection and to some degree protection of historic resources can be ensured, then the other goals and recommendations are appropriate. So in terms of environmental protection, you'll see the first one is identify and protect the most sensitive biological and ecological areas, including installing signage and also limiting access or installing barriers where that's appropriate. There might be cases where installing signage is appropriate to draw attention to a particular resource and inform and educate people. There might also be other circumstances where that signage might be about limiting access or controlling access for a particularly sensitive resource. Another recommendation is to simply be a good steward of the existing natural habitats and ecosystems, and also identify and implement opportunities for riparian restoration and mitigation projects, including removal of invasive species, and also stabilizing eroding stream banks using appropriate methods. We recommend continuing the city's and the county's ongoing efforts to improve water quality in partnership with some of our local organizations who are doing that work already. We recommend encouraging the use of locally native plants throughout the river corridor, and that includes public properties like parks and greenways, and also private properties where appropriate and where possible. Goal 6 is kind of about understanding and inspiration and action, and that's to implement signage and conduct events that will educate members of the public, help generate awareness and appreciation, and ultimately inspire action to conserve and steward the natural resources within the river corridor. Recommendations 7, 8, and 9 are all policies for land management, or in some cases, land development. And those include continuing to administer a stormwater management program that meets or exceeds the minimum state regulations, protecting and enhancing riparian forests, with particular emphasis on forest resources within the 100-foot stream buffer, and also reducing mowing or even establishing no-mow zones to provide grassland habitat that facilitate pollinator species. And a quick note on that, we're already experimenting with that at Dardentow Park. I'm sure some or maybe all of you have noticed that in the past few weeks. But it's obviously a strategy that's good for the environment because of the habitat that it produces, but also reduces mowing and the environmental benefits that come along with that. The last recommendation for environmental protection is about collaborating with other organizations to pursue funding and other resources for conservation efforts and mitigation efforts. And as you can see, there's more detail on page 35 in the plan on environmental protection. Okay, now Sandy, ready? Thanks. The recreational activities recommendations is one of the more lengthy sections, and that's because the city and the county has, place-based or site-specific recommendations that we each wanted to include. So I'm going to hit these at a little bit of a higher level and just leave space for questions that you may have based on what you may have seen in the plan and the documents that Cameron shared today and last month, or just based on your own experience, moving through Pantops and moving through the river corridor. So for recreational activities, improve the connections between the river corridor and nearby neighborhoods. That's the gist of recommendation 1. And that connection, that improved connectivity, would include multiple types of connections, including on-street things like sidewalks and bike lanes, as well as off-street connections like shared use paths, even primitive trails where appropriate. The second recommendation is to improve and expand the trail system within the corridor. And similarly, the next recommendation is to improve and expand the park system within the corridor. So there's a lot that those 3 recommendations capture. Connect people to the river corridor from their neighborhoods, improve the trail network within the river corridor, expand the park system within the river corridor. And there's a lot of sort of associated objectives and strategies to those goals, but that's kind of, those are the orienting high-level principles. Continuing on, it's important to increase the number and types of public access points to the river and to the actual waterfront, including special consideration for people with limited mobility or limited abilities. Identify opportunities to expand vehicular access for recreational users where appropriate. Develop the parks and trails in ways that successfully support private recreation service providers. And the idea here is to help facilitate increased commercial recreational activity. There's a recommendation about minimizing loose trash and litter. A recommendation to develop and maintain a trail network with various surface types and different specifications in order to accommodate different user types and people with different ability levels. There's a recommendation to promote recreational wildlife observation, and also a recommendation to use vegetation as sound barriers to mitigate the urban soundscape and to help enhance the natural sounds of nature, whether that's the water or the wildlife or whatever it may be. All right, and continuing on to recommendations for multi-purpose trails and bridges. At the conclusion of this, I'll turn it over to Dan Butch, our transportation planner, who can provide more information about the Rivanna River bike ped crossing that's been studied and which is in the planning stages right now. But this looks at that as well as lots of other recommendations, including continuing to support new bike ped bridges at strategic locations with consideration for the visual impacts. in considering the necessity of maintaining the Rivanna River's designation as a Virginia Scenic River. It was actually the first river in the Commonwealth with that designation. Another recommendation to promote the use of trails and bridges as transportation infrastructure, for commuting traffic, and to provide mobility choices other than vehicle trips. So, bike ped bridges are certainly part of the recreational infrastructure, but it's important to engineer, plan, design, and fund them, at least some of them, as true transportation infrastructure. There's a recommendation to develop a robust wayfinding system throughout the river corridor, both physically using signage, but also digitally using apps and other device-based methods. One recommendation is to provide seating areas at regular intervals along the river corridor. I know, I'll just speak to the county's efforts on that. We've noticed that the Old Mills Trail, and we've heard feedback that the Old Mills Trail could certainly be improved in that way by having some more places to rest. And we're taking steps to make that happen this spring. So you may see some new benches along the Old Mills Trail in the next handful of weeks, if not sooner. Continuing on with the last couple of recommendations here, support the designation of portions of the trail network within the river corridor for incorporation into the proposed regional 3-notched trail, which is envisioned between Richmond and Stanton. And finally, consider strategies to improve the safety and the comfort of bicyclists and pedestrians along existing streets that provide access to and from the river corridor. So I think that's it for the summary of the recommendations, if I remember correctly. And so I think Dan is ready to speak to the bike ped bridge plans and project.
Sure. My name is Dan Butch, Senior Planner in Transportation. A lot of familiar faces here. But just to provide an update on a specific project that has been identified, it's being identified in this Rivanna River Corridor Plan, but also from the recent 2019 Jefferson Area Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan that has been an endorsed plan into our comprehensive plan by the board. And in that, this connection was called out for a bicycle pedestrian connection within this vicinity of the river. And so VDOT, from this plan, in working with VDOT, they offered to do a feasibility study for this connection here. And this was 2019 into 2020. And this feasibility study identified some locations and basically narrowed down to 2 alignments that work best and fit the landscape, the preferred connection. And again, this is for the Woolen Mills Riverview Park area on the city side, as well as State Farm and connection to Martha Jefferson on that side. So that was the preferred alignment. So it was not looking near Freebridge or anything north of Freebridge. So this was the area that was identified in the study. And from that study, they narrowed it down to 2 locations that would work best. And this public process, this was a VDOT study through their consultants, but was the public process was administered through the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. And last fall, there was a public feedback forum to gather input, and the alignments were provided, and we had almost 70 people turn out to this, provided a lot of feedback back in November. And so this study the goal was to develop this to make it a potential project. And so just last week, county staff, we took our potential projects to the Board of Supervisors. And even though this pretty much asked for no resolution or anything, but rather just guidance and endorsement of direction of this project. And so it looks like this would be going through the MPO to do it as a smart scale project for next year. So, I mean, if we'll get the public involvement process will still continue. It has to be further identified which alignment will be selected. So it just looks like we're going in the right direction. We got the board's support. And so the city should be, I think they're doing the same process that the county staff just did as well. So yeah, that sums up the status of that project. If you have any questions.
I have one question for whoever would like to answer it. I don't hear any mention of people going into the water on purpose or accidentally. What's the thought in terms of use of the river for exercise, swimming, or cooling off, or whatever? Or is that specifically going to be prohibited and enforced?
I can take it. Tim, you might want to jump in, but we did address that in some of the recreational activities recommendations about improving access to the riverfront itself, thinking through, for example, the historic and cultural features, and thinking about how people who are traveling along the river by boat or, kayak or, floating down the river, how they might have the opportunity to experience some of these cultural features as well from being on the river itself. As far as policies, Tim, you're probably in a better position to address that than I am.
Yeah, I can try to answer Mr. Hiss's question. I think it's a good question. And like Sandy said, some of the details that relate to water recreation are kind of embedded in some of the objectives and strategies underneath the goal headlines. But in general, improving and increasing access to the waterfront is a really important goal. We've got a couple existing access points. The city recently really upgraded theirs at Riverview Park using a lot of volunteer labor and volunteer coordination. You may have seen that. It looks really nice and works well. And there's an opportunity to potentially look at similar upgrades on the county side of the river. That could either be upgrades or expansions of existing access points or potentially additional new access points. There aren't a lot of opportunities that jump out at me when we study this corridor until you get further downriver, maybe to Milton. But with the focus just on this urban corridor section, we looked at the importance of that and heard about the importance of that. One of the examples that seems like a potential future possibility is the sediment island in between Pantops and Woolen Mills, where Moores Creek enters the river. I've seen people fishing down there, swimming, tubing through there, tubing stationary. So that seems like one potential opportunity to maybe look at partnerships or other ways to increase public access to the water at that location. But certainly I think the trend would be to support and enhance the growing use of the river for recreation and not necessarily try to, regulate or restrict it. That would only maybe be appropriate in environmentally sensitive locations or bluffs, places where erosion is happening and being a problem.
Another question I have is, how deep is the river? I'm sure it varies a lot, but are there deep sections or is it mostly shallow water?
That is a great question. I don't have the answer to that. And like you said, it varies upstream and downstream, and it varies bank to bank. There's usually at least one channel within the riverbed that seems deep enough to carry the water. And there's certainly lots of shallow sections, especially right now. But it fluctuates throughout the year. It fluctuates bank to bank, and it fluctuates upstream and downstream.
So question, but go ahead, Ida Mae, if you want. I'll ask after you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Tim, a very small question. One of your points said a goal is to pursue strategies to reduce the accumulation of loose trash. Have any idea what those strategies are?
Well, there's different strategies, and then they all have varying degrees of feasibility. This is really a maintenance question, and my recollection of these detailed conversations relates to the fact that a lot of the impact for this recommendation has to start upstream outside of the river corridor. And that creates a lot of complexity and difficulty. What you're talking about at that point is different infrastructure for your gutters or storm drains or drop inlets that can collect trash more effectively. But then that becomes a maintenance issue at that point, at that source of the trash. And so I don't know if I know the answer on this one, but as far as what we can do inside the river corridor, you know, making sure that we specify, purchase, and install waste receptacles that are flood resistant, that have tops wherever possible, as opposed to just an open cylinder. You know, making those choices deliberately and planfully is one way that we can make an improvement there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
Couple questions. First of all, I think that in the past, I know that there's been talk about and some discussion in reference to developing and starting a Pantops trail crew, similar to the model of the Crozet trail crew, to kind of help with kind of helping maintain the trail and kind of giving us guidance as far as getting rid of invasives and clearing paths and that kind of thing. I don't know if there's been further discussion in reference to just trying to start something like that or not.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I would say those gears are just now starting to turn with a little more revolution to them. That idea, that concept is an extremely important opportunity. With limited staff and limited resources, it seems like leveraging the passions and the availability and the time and the energy of people who want to make their community better, it's a no-brainer. We just need to get a little bit more internal capacity and preparation to do that in an organized and effective way, or a more organized way. And so I think you'll be hearing more about that this calendar year, as far as opportunities to participate in an organized volunteer program. And I'm sorry, the second part is already.
Just to add on to that, I guess, first of all, I think there is a rich resource of volunteers, especially since the pandemic. So many people enjoy using the river. I think we could leverage that volunteer. It's just a matter of starting that program. And the second question was, I know I've been involved a little bit with the Stream Watch in Albemarle County and looking at water quality within the streams. How much monitoring is being done within the river corridor as far as the quality of the river water and what can be done to improve that?
Well, I'll try to take this one too. I know the Rivanna Conservation Alliance has some monitoring stations. The only one I can identify on the main stem of the river for certain is at the confluence of the North Fork and South Fork. And that's a little bit upstream of the urban section, but I know they're also monitoring water quality at Moores Creek, and I have to guess they're doing the same on the main stem through the city-county interface. But that's the extent of my knowledge on it.
Thank you very much. I just had.
You're welcome.
Sandy, you referred to your report several times. What is the status of that in terms of its availability to anyone who's interested in this project?
The plan that the PDC is working on, is that what you're asking about?
You referred to page 39, page 42, page 46, etc.
Yeah, that is the draft plan that the PDC has been working on as part of this plan. So I'm going to, as soon as I finish answering your question, I'm going to put a link into the chat box. I think Cameron might have emailed it out after your last meeting, I think he said, but just so you all have it fresh so you can look at it. I'll send you the link to that. So what we have now is we have a draft plan that we've presented to the project steering committee. And so what we are working on is taking some of the feedback that we received from the steering committee, as well as doing some formatting to the document just to make it look a lot nicer than the version that's previously available, and to tie in some graphics to help communicate. And then we're going to be doing informational sessions at the Albemarle County and City of Charlottesville Planning Commissions, and then at the board and city council meetings as well, just as informational items to get their feedback before we start doing public hearings to potentially adopt the plan.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. I sent an email out at about 4 p.m. this afternoon, and there was 3 links in the body of that email. And the first one is a link to the TJPDC website, their page that's set up specifically for the corridor plan. And if you click that link, it's about a third of the way down the page. There's actually a PDF of the draft plan that we've been speaking about tonight. And so if you click it, you can read it in your web browser. And there's no sort of restrictions for this page. I mean, anyone from the public who has internet can see the draft of the plan. But if anyone didn't receive that email, please let me know, and I can send you a follow-up email individually so that you have the link.
I did review all of the plans and the drone pictures and everything else. It's very well presented visually in that email that you sent us. Any other questions or discussion from the committee? Hearing none, I'll extend a thank you to the 3 of you for an excellent presentation tonight. We appreciate your time tonight and all the hours of work that you put into the project so far. It looks like you've got a real top-notch effort underway.
Thank you for having me tonight.
You're quite welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Anyone else?
Thanks so much for all your efforts. Greatly appreciate it all.
Okay, next on the agenda, Community Development Department update, development projects in Pantops. Our good friend and loyal ally, Cameron Langill. Cameron?
Thanks, Dick. Hi, everybody. Let's see. So I gave an update last month, and I'm going to go through those same projects again and just give you a status update. Interestingly enough, we have received a new development project. It's a site plan proposal that's currently under review with staff that I didn't mention last month. It came in between our previous meeting and tonight, so I'll give you some info on that. But to start, I'm sure you all have noticed the Wawa is now open. The storage facility that's on that same property is also open as well. The hotel is still finishing up some work on the interior of the building. I don't have a timeline for when that will be completed, but from what I can see, it looks like there's still quite a bit of work to get done on the interior. So it will probably still be a few months before that's nearing completion. The Malloy Ford site, or the former Malloy Ford site, I had mentioned last month, you probably noticed this as well. They tore down the portion of the main building that used to be their indoor showroom. And they have a site plan in review that is going to replace that portion of the building with a more modern facade. And then they are going to be building a new office, and is the service reception building, as they're calling it. At the back of the property, they have this other smaller building that's detached from the main structure. And so this new office service reception building is about 4,500 square feet. That site plan is still under review. It has not been approved yet. Staff sent comments back on April 23rd. There's still some revisions that need to be made. So we're just waiting on a resubmittal. The next project is the Pantops Shopping Center. I mentioned this one for the first time last month. We have a major site plan amendment that's under review that is proposing to build a new car wash structure that measures approximately 1,100 square feet at the back corner of the property where that little gazebo area is currently at. It's the area where the Little Caesars used to be. The Little Caesars is since closed, but it's really small. I mean, it's only 1,100 square feet, and they are going to be constructing some new parking spaces. That has gone through one review with staff, so it's at its initial stages. It's not nearing approval yet, but I will continue to give you updates on that one as we move forward. The Hampton Inn site plan, that is the hotel that's along State Farm Boulevard, that is still under review. Staff completed their most recent review back on May 10th. There's not much left that needs to get fixed on the plan. The developer simply needs to get their easements recorded with the county, and then they're going to need to update the plan to show where those easements are. And at that point, they will be ready for approval. So that one will probably be approved in the next 1 to 3 months, just depending on how long it takes for the developer to submit it. The next one I'll talk about is the Overlook Hotel, and that is the rezoning that we had a community meeting for back at our January meeting. Staff did one review on that project, and we sent the applicant some comments with some questions and revisions that we were suggesting. They decided to not request to schedule a public hearing with the Planning Commission or the board yet because they wanted to resubmit for another review with staff to see if they could address our comments. So they submitted a revised version of the plan in late April, and we sent another round of comments on May 7th. And so there still are no public hearings scheduled yet. The applicant has not requested any, and I suspect that they will submit that application for a third review with staff. There were still some outstanding questions related to the building architecture, as well as the interconnectivity with the adjacent parcels. And so until those things get resolved, staff was asking the applicant to continue to further refine their plan. And I believe that's where they are at right now. Of course, next month I will give you an update. But that covers the projects I had mentioned last month. And so the new project that we received is a townhome proposal on the piece of land that used to be proposed for the Vistas at South Pantops, which is the project that was going to be next to the Overlook condominiums. So the Vistas at South Pantops was a proposal to do 144 apartment units. Due to a bunch of extenuating circumstances, the developer has since abandoned that project and that idea. And the new proposal is, it's an initial site plan that we have under review, and it's only proposing 40 townhomes. That application, like I said, it just entered its review with staff, and our comments will be sent to the applicant by June 10th. If anyone would like to receive a link to look at the plan themselves, you can send me an email, and it's all available online to the public through our County View system. But again, it's 40 townhomes. The original proposal was 144 apartments. And other than that, there's still no updates on the DMV parcel. We haven't heard anything more from that property owner or any potential developers that are looking at purchasing it and redeveloping it. So I'm keeping my eye on it. I know everyone's wondering what's going to happen there, but there's been no news since last month on that one. And so that finishes my list. I don't know if anyone had any questions about any projects that I can answer. Stephanie?
Cameron, what about that the extended stay proposal that was going to be up by the giant park?
Yeah, that's the Overlook Hotel rezoning.
Oh, it is. Okay. Oh, that's the Overlook Hotel.
Yep.
That's the one that's the longer stay one. Okay. Wasn't sure if it was. I think
there's a comment on that proposal that says no dwelling units proposed. Is a dwelling unit an extended stay room?
No, so under the zoning ordinance, the way we would define a dwelling unit is basically anything that is being rented. So an apartment, of course, you know, townhomes, I mean, single family detached homes could be rented. But if it's in a building that's a commercial business, even if it's an extended stay, like where they, you know, rent rooms to people for a month, that just still qualifies as a hotel extended stay version. It doesn't constitute a dwelling unit. The building code also has some very specific criteria for what a dwelling unit is. And from my understanding, the Overlook Hotel, it will be extended stay and have somewhat of a dining area in those rooms, but it's not going to be a full-on residential or commercial kitchen, which that is what under the building code constitutes something becoming a dwelling unit. So the Overlook Hotel, it's a hotel use. It's not a residential dwelling unit use. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Bea, go ahead.
Yes, Cameron, the 40 townhomes that'll be going up, any affordable housing with those?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but that property is zoned R15, which is our highest density residential zoning district, conventional district. And they could propose affordable dwelling units if they were seeking bonus density. But based on the acreage of the site, the 40 townhouses is way below the 15 dwelling units per acre that they are allowed to build. So I can take a look and see. Sometimes developers do just propose affordable units, even for a buy right project like that. But off the top of my head, I don't have a definitive answer. I'm sorry.
So it is a buy right proposal?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And it's right along the river too, basically, right?
Yeah. That property is very constrained by a variety of environmental resources. It's got a large area that falls within the FEMA 100-year floodplain. And then there's other areas of it that fall within the preserved steep slopes overlay zoning district, which is very restrictive in terms of what it allows for development. And so I think that was part of the reason why the original project has gone away and this one is proposed. There is a small area that is adjacent to the Overlook condominium parcel that doesn't have any of those environmental features. And when I was looking at the layout of the plan earlier, they can put this street in that they're proposing and have their dwelling units and not encroach in any of those environmental features. And they don't have to grade into them or anything like that. And from my understanding of the previous project, because there were more dwelling units and larger buildings, they had to try and figure out ways to get their utility line extensions through the site. And some of that did impact the preserved steep slopes. So that was sort of an issue with that one. And I don't know exactly why they just totally abandoned the first project, but this one is a smaller scale and it doesn't go into those environmental areas.
Good.
Cameron, based on that comment and the 100-year floodplain, et cetera, would there be like a green space or like a pop-up park or something like that for people in that area, or is that in the plans?
Yeah, so the master plan does designate the area that has all those environmental features as an area that could potentially be dedicated to the county as a public park. And again, that park would be the one that connects up across onto the north side of South Pantops Drive and goes to where the large stormwater facility is that's behind the giant shopping center. Again, the county can't require the developer to dedicate that land to us since this is a by right project. But the site plan they have submitted does not show any development in that area. And so I think that's something we will be commenting on in our comment letters, asking what their intent is, because it's not really usable for development purposes. I mean, you can't put parking in that area if they have those features. So that could be something that we work with, and maybe that developer would be agreeable to that. I mean, that's what happened with the Presidio apartments that are just south of the hospital. They had some land there that was in the floodplain and had preserved steep slopes. And so we asked them when they were going through their by right site plan review, if they would be willing to consider dedicating that land to us. And they said, sure, which that doesn't happen very often. So it was surprising.
For this also, that will happen.
Yeah, maybe. So, I mean, that's something that we will be speaking with this developer about as they get further along in the process.
Cameron, any updates on the exit at 124 on 64?
Yeah, the diverging diamond.
Right.
Yes. If in case you haven't driven through there recently, please be aware that they have posted some new speed limit signs because work has begun. Right now, they are doing site preparation in order to relocate some of the utilities that are on the on-ramp that's south of, the overpass as you're going on to 64 heading east. So all of the work so far is only in that area. But I saw yesterday, it looked like there were some new cones going up at the off-ramp as you're heading eastward, coming up on the exit. So the area that's between 64 and the off-ramp may start to see some grading activities going on there in the near future. Eventually, we will see the whole site's going to be under construction. The anticipated completion date is still March of 2023. And that was according to the most recent update I got from VDOT back in the late fall. So as each month goes by, you will begin to see more construction taking place. But right now it's just in that one area that's on the, I'm gonna say, south side of the overpass.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Cameron, the exit from the Wawa station down to Route 20, is that open?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So they have an actual, they've got a private street easement over that. If you're heading toward Freebridge on 250 and you make a right into the site, they have a private street that you can pull into the driveway of the Wawa on the right. So you can pull into the storage facility driveway on the left. And eventually you'll be able to pull into the hotel driveway on the right. But the street is open for its full length from 250 up to 20. And so I've driven it a couple times just to test it out. It seems to be working well. Just so you know, the entrance onto 250, it's a right in and a right out only. So you can't make a left turn out of the site and try and head onto 250 down toward I-64. They've put up what we call a pork chop. It's a concrete barrier that's supposed to restrict vehicle movements so that they don't make left-hand turns and try and get into that center lane where, where everyone, the delivery trucks for the dealerships park their cars and try and unload their cars. So yeah, VDOT did not want them to have a left out of that site or a left into that site for safety purposes because it's so close to the intersection between 250 and 20. At certain times of day, peak travel hours, there's going to be a lot of traffic there, and it wouldn't really be the safest if we have a bunch of cars trying to turn in and do those movements. So, but yes, it is open.
Cameron, if they're exiting off of 20, if they come in or maybe on the 250 side and they exit off of the 20 side, can they make a left and a right, or just a right turn when they're coming out of the 20 exit?
You can make a left if you're going onto 20. You can make a left onto 20, or you could make a right.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sarah Robinson raised some issues by email. One was the establishment of trash containers on the trail behind Riverside Village.
Yes, I'm working with VDOT to see if we can get some speed bumps along there. The long range goal is to turn that into perhaps a one-way from 250 to Elk Drive, one way. And then the longer range goal is to maybe close it off, a section of that off, so it's only pedestrian and you can, you know, park in a certain area, but it's all walking and things like that. So that's going to, of course, not happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but the thinking is we can get those speed, if we can get those speed bumps, not the humps, but the bumps, which nobody likes, if we can get some of those up, that will actually curtail the a lot of the traffic, I think, because what happens now is they go south on 20, and instead of going to 250 and turning right, they'll turn right on Elk Drive and then cut through on, you know, Freebridge. So we're taking this a step at a time, but working with VDOT because it is a public street. Does that answer your question?
Well, it was actually a question I'm relaying for B. I'm sorry, for Sarah. Sarah is the one that raised the issues.
Yes, 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 yeah. And Sarah knows what I'm doing also. She's, yeah. We've all, we went and planted milkweed seeds
right.
Along places in Darden Town, and hopefully either this year or next year, we'll have a lot of milkweed plants for the monarch butterflies.
Cameron, that whole traffic issue is part of the state and local traffic control street construction project, I believe, is it not, to do something with that Freebridge Lane?
Yes, so the Pantops master plan that we adopted back in 2019 identified converting Freebridge Lane into a one-way street as one of the implementation projects. And then, as B mentioned, a longer range component of that would be to enhance it as a green street, is what the master plan says. And so that would be a focus on making sure, or enhancing, you know, the ability for bicyclists or pedestrians to use the street, in addition to the segment of Old Mills Trail that is right there next to Freebridge Lane. It would be one of the capital projects that the county would undertake because, as B mentioned, Freebridge Lane is a VDOT road. So I don't think there's any sort of anticipated start date for looking at that project, but it would first require a feasibility analysis to identify what the outcomes should be, and then go through the actual planning process for that, and then any sort of construction that would need to occur to enhance the street and make it one way and then a green street.
Is that right, the state or the county, or?
It would be a combination of both. I think the county would be the ones to identify as a project that they want to put in the CIP. And then from there, we would work with VDOT to do whatever they need to do to, you know, assist us. I mean, it could be a smart scale project, but it would probably be a low priority on the smart scale just based on all the other kind of projects that different localities submit every year. So it might be something that is mainly the focus of the county, and then we work with VDOT just because it's their road currently.
Do you see that there's widespread community support for making those kinds of changes?
Oh, yes, there is support, absolutely. The problem is we're also competing with 5 other supervisors in their areas. So a smart scale project is every 2 years. Capital improvement programs, projects, those come every year, but you know, you usually have a long list for that. And so it's not going to be overnight. That's why I'm trying to propose the speed bumps, because I think that will greatly slow down and reduce traffic. People who want to use that as a shortcut and speedway, that will, you know, put a kink in their armor, so to speak. And
requires state approval, Cameron?
Pardon?
I'm asking Cameron, would a speed bump require state approval?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Road?
Yeah. I'm working with VDOT on that.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other issues on that? Okay, B, this floor is yours if you have any other issues you'd like to make.
No, I mean, that was the big thing along actually having for Free Bridge and then the milkweed plantings done by the scouts and local volunteers. I will say, if it gets to the point that I need to inundate VDOT or others with letters, then I would count on this committee and I would say, hey, you know, send a letter, but we're not there yet. So we're just kind of taking it one step at a time to let everybody else know how important this is to us, that, you know, that road, Free Bridge Lane. Oh, good news that the one gentleman that lives on the road that has all kinds of trucks and vehicles and everything, he is actually cleaning up. Sarah has been working with him. They've developed a relationship. I understand he has a friend, a female friend, and she's a big influence, and things are looking better. Not perfect, but they're looking better. And he would like that road closed. So that actually gives us a lot of leverage. So
he or she would like that road closed.
well he would, but he's being influenced by she. Okay. And so we're real happy he has a she in his life.
Okay. That's how things work sometimes.
Yeah. But otherwise, okay.
Committee membership, July 1. Do you have any new members coming forward?
No, that's the other thing I was going to ask, if people have other members to put forward, because unfortunately we are losing some people. And but I do believe, I mean, even though you're not on the committee, you can always attend. But yeah, we are losing some members, so we do need more members. So please, I'll be more than happy to call them. As I have our new members and everything, and speak with them and tell them about this, or, you know, Dick can, whatever. But we do need more members. So I'd really appreciate if you all have names to suggest that could really add to our CAC. I feel that we have one of the best, strongest CACs in the county.
Good. Any other comments for B? Okay, thank you, B. Corey, do you have any comments if you're still here?
Yep, Richard, I'm still here, and I don't have anything to add. That's the advantage of having Cameron here, who can cover all the ground for me. So I'm just sitting back riding, but I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, Corey, glad to have you with us. Under old business, I wanted to have Sarah's issues brought up, so we've covered that. Any other old business? And new business, all I have is the next meeting will be June 28th, same time, same place. I presume it'll be Zoom.
Oh.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you all, but at Dardentown, the Dardentown Memorial Committee met. It's comprised of 4 people, myself, Ned Galloway, who's the chair of the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, and 2 city members, which is Lloyd Snook and Heather Hill. So we all met, and we are actually putting in Dardentown, we have 4 tennis courts. And if you've gone there to play, you also realize that we get a lot of pickleball players, and they bring in their own nets and everything. Well, they've actually raised the money themselves, and we are having 2 of the tennis courts transformed into 6 pickleball courts. And the other 2 will remain tennis courts. And what the county is going to do, what we're going to do is to actually count, have a counter so that we can tell how many people play tennis, how many people play pickleball, because evidently pickleball is really, really growing, and it's for all age levels. So in the future, maybe in Dardentown, we may be building more tennis courts and or pickleball courts. But evidently the pickleball community is very excited because they're going to have permanent pickleball courts. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie.
Definitely a growing sport, yes.
Yes, so that is an announcement, yes.
Okay. Our next meeting then is June 28th, same time, same place. I'm presuming we'll still be on Zoom.
Yes, if I can actually speak to that also. By law, we can go after the governor has declared the state of emergency over. We can continue with Zoom meetings for 6 months. Well, they just passed another law that in July, it will take effect, that once the governor declares the emergency over, we can go for 1 year using Zoom meetings.
Great.
Okay.
So does that mean after 1 year, they'll all be in person?
So far. Yeah, so far. But, you know, I mean, by then, if we go another year using Zoom, you know, the legislature, the General Assembly may approve, give us the authority to continue with Zoom meetings, at least for CAC. Pardon?
For an extension.
Right.
Okay, last comment I have is I want to thank Cameron for his very special help to me in terms of setting up these meetings and making them full of very valuable content. I appreciate it very much, Cameron. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Dick. And thank you to all of you. It's, you know, this CAC, it's, you know, an example of what the CAC should be. And so I told everyone that was coming out tonight that you all were very excited and they were excited to come present. And so, you know, hopefully as we move forward, we can still get some good agenda items and have some guest speakers come in and talk about all the different things going on, because as you all know, there's a lot of stuff going on. So
sure, a lot of things going on, that's for sure.
Yeah. So thank you all.
Carolyn, and thank you, Corey, for being with us this evening. Appreciate it. That's it, folks.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you, Dick.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.